Hello everyone, Trophy Wine Hunter. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I'm doing a review of a 1986 Pavillon Rouge. Let's talk a little bit about Pavillon Rouge. So it is Chateau Margaux's second wine and was first released in the 17th century. Although it was not named Pavillon Rouge at that time, it was actually just on the bottle, it just said a second and then EME Vin. So just to denote that it was the second wine. It wasn't given the title of Pavillon Rouge until 1908. During 1930 to 1970, Pavillon Rouge was never produced and they restarted it in 1977. Nowadays, they actually have a third wine. I think they also have a fourth wine too. So things have changed quite a bit since this wine has been produced. Chateau Margaux's vineyard composition is 75% Cabernet Sauvignon, 20% Merlot, and then 5% Petit, Verdot, and Cabernet Franc. I believe that's fairly similar to the mix of this wine. I couldn't find the mix of the 86 vintage. If anyone can find that, that's great. And I believe about a third of the vintage was put into the, or the total production was put into the Pavillon Rouge in that year. So Pavillon Rouge is really made up of the same vines that are used in Chateau Margaux, other than they are a little bit younger and they're not judged in terms of the quality of the grapes they produce to be good enough to put in the Grand Vin. 1986 was a really strong year. It was a great vintage, great weather during the summer months. There was a slight bit of rain before they actually picked the grapes, which in hindsight, if you look at their website, they said actually it was a good thing. Just a little bit of rain, touch of rain, which is not a bad thing. And then the rest of the season was wonderful. So 86 was one of these very great vintages, lots of tannins, and that's why it's survived so well throughout the years. It was also the first vintage where Chateau Margaux decided to kind of crop things a little bit more in terms of the selection. So this whole idea of selecting yields was first done in 1986. And so I think it does show in the wine. But this is kind of an example of, in the past, perhaps the technology wasn't as good, but you can still have great vintages. And in great vintages, Chateau Margaux was producing great wines. And nowadays, I think even with what we call off vintages, because of their techniques, so many things that they've done in the winery, all the technology and all the foresight that has happened in the wineries, with not just Chateau Margaux, with most other wineries, you get less and less of these bad years. But if we go back to the 1980s, there wasn't as much technology, and it really was based on, of course, the winemaking was important, but really important on the weather. And 86 was just a great year in terms of the actual weather and the climate for Bordeaux. Chateau Margaux is one of these wineries that doesn't really like to do automated selection, even though they have these scanners. They do use it at this point, but they prefer manual selection of grapes. And for sure in 1986, it was done manually. And so after manual selection of the grapes, then it's followed by between 18 and 24 months of aging in new French oak. It's a second wine. It still uses new oak for so long. So obviously it's, to me, that means that the ripeness of the grapes are tremendous compared to even, growth wines in Bordeaux. One of the things that people, a lot of times, beginner or people that are not into wines always say is, well, I drink a cheap wine and I drink this wine and there's not much difference, so I don't know why you're doing this, Trophy. I don't know why you get paid so much for wine. And part of it is you're losing, if you're just talking about value, like a $10 wine and, this wine maybe, let's say it's a $300, is it 30 times better? No, it's not 30 times better. So then the argument is, well, why don't I just drink a $10 wine? Well, it's because of the other factors. And so when we look at wines, what I can say are trophy wines, we also talk about wine wisdom. What do you learn from the wine? And when you're drinking trophy wines, you learn nothing about life other than you had a good drink. I agree, you should just drink $10 wines. And this is what beginner or people that are not drinking wines don't understand. It's not just about quality to ratio. It's not about, oh, this wine has 93 points and this wine has 91 points, so the 93 point better is better. Or this wine that's $10 or $40 is 93 points, this wine is 93 points, so they're the same. No, that's not how you approach trophy wines. Whenever I drink a trophy wine, I hope that through the study of that wine or through the drinking of that wine, that I learn something that I can apply to other parts of life. So what did I learn about, or what type of wine wisdom did I take away from drinking this wine? One is not to judge the book by its cover in two ways. First of all, this wine rating, my Wine Spectator, was 84 points. If I had just believed that without taking a chance for myself, I would have missed out on a tremendous experience, and hopefully other people can benefit, because I can tell you there is no possible way that this wine was 84 points. Now, if you have a bad bottle or bad storage, maybe, but this wine was tremendous, and no one, I don't think, in there who drank this wine, even if you were a beginner, would agree that this was 84 points. The second point is it's a second wine, and even though this label of a second wine, it's not a second wine in anyone's books. In fact, it's probably better than most growth wines, and I would argue most even second growth wines, or even most super seconds. So don't judge a book by the cover. The second thing I learned from this wine is quality. When you have a quality producer who puts time into something and you have a great vintage, what is produced is something that can last a long time. And the third thing I learned from this wine is to look at things from a long-term perspective. So the Wine Spectator rating was rated in 1989. And at that time, it could have been a terrible wine. But now we have the hindsight of looking back at it. It's now 2023. We're now talking about almost 30 some odd years afterwards. And we can look backwards and say that was probably not the right choice. So sometimes I think in life we judge things too quickly. We say something is not good, and we are proven wrong with history. And all I'm saying is that, not that that happens all the time, but sometimes when you have an opinion, it's okay to stem that opinion or to change that opinion, because sometimes in that era we can only see a portion of that progression or that thing's cycle. Maybe there's more to it. And I see this a lot in sports when we, for instance, write off athletes. You know, when athletes are great, we laud them. When they are, lose, we tell them, we say, oh, their career is over. But a lot of them come back. And this is the whole idea about life, people, and wines. They have a cycle. Don't just write off a wine or write off something just because of one taste. Go back to it. Maybe there's a comeback. Maybe it changes, and maybe it evolves. So that's kind of what I mean when we talk about drinking trophy wines. And every time I drink this wine, those are the lessons that will come back to me. So let's look at the wine and the label. So the label, actually, I kind of scotch tape back on. When I got it, through shipping, I think the label just fell off because of just moisture. So this is 86 Pavillon Rouge from Margaux region. Very simple label. You don't see a lot of sediment, because I think what happened is there was sediment, but then you can see a little bit of shade of that. But what happened is we poured back the wine, and I think that kind of killed the sediment, which is why it might be a little bit cloudy on the, again, part of the sediment has come back into the wine, but when I first drank the wine, it was clear. You can see the color is still very vibrant. There's still a lot of life on this wine. So wonderful bottle, and it looks, there's a little bit of browning, but I don't think if I told you this is 86 that you would think it's over the hill. So it's very consistent with the age of the wine. Let's taste the wine. And I'll let you know that we've had this now open for about 3 hours. We did have it at a very nice restaurant, Verdot and Company. I'll probably have a review of that at the end of this video. It's a 1-star Michelin restaurant in Vancouver, in Main Street. Very knowledgeable wine people. All the wait staff are big wine people, so they really know their stuff. So it has been decanted and now put back into the bottle. You'll see when I do the close-up of the actual wine, it's a little cloudy. That's because it's been put back into the bottle and there was sediment. So it's kind of been mixed in. But I'll tell you, when we opened it, it was nice. It was a little bit on the acidic side, and it needed about 15 to 30 minutes to kind of firm up. Once it firmed up, it was classic Margaux in terms of the aroma, a little bit of floral elements, violets, and then kind of a little toasty oak, plums, and then the firmness came in. So really nice. We enjoyed it throughout the meal. And now I'm home, so it's about 3 hours later, and just retasting it. So let's taste it. So on the smell, it's a little bit different than before. When I first opened it, it was quite acidic. It needed about 15 to 30 minutes to kind of firm up. And then that was pretty classic Margaux aromas, like a little bit of floral elements, underlying fruit, a little bit of oak kind of in the smell of it. Now, it's almost like a dried plums, a little bit of floral elements. I'd like to say like roses a little bit more. Roses and violets, but yeah, a little bit more floral on the nose and not as much oak influence. It smells a little bit more ethereal. So how it started, it's, I guess, about 15 minutes in. It was quite acidic at first. It definitely was not off, but it needed some time. And then around 30 minutes, it really firmed up, and it was, I thought, quite nice. Then as I drank during the restaurant, we had food, and we also had a newer style Margaux region wine. And I thought that it kind of confused me a bit, confused my palate. So I kind of didn't drink this wine anymore because it was very difficult to kind of taste when you have a very young Margaux, which overpowers this. And now I'm coming back to this, but again, a different smell. And this is what I find with most high-end Bordeaux. When people say, hey, why do we pay so much money for high-end Bordeaux? It's because you get so many different variations in just one night. In the course of 3 hours, it's like I drank 4 to 5 different wines because it keeps on giving me different aroma, smell. So it's so interesting. So yeah, this is a little bit more on the plum, dried plums and floral elements right now. So let's taste it. Lots of tannin still. The body is medium, good acidity. There is fruit, but it's almost like dried cranberries. I taste the oak a little bit. Very relaxing and pleasing. Very easy to drink, almost like water. So there is tannin, but it's very relaxed. It's very silky smooth. But different than right bank wines like Cheval Blanc, it has that strength still in the wine. And then the aftertaste now is a little bit of loaminess, a little bit of forest floor, a little bit of kind of earthiness in it. So it's a very interesting wine, but this is a type of wine that, again, I think it's very easy to drink a whole bottle of this quickly. You can see that I'm taking gulps of this because it's so easy to drink. Wonderful aroma. And it's got the perfect balance between strength and ethereality and softness, subtleness. It's both. It's very hard to describe, but it's got both. It's got a subtle side to it, and it's got a strength to it too. So, and I think that's why Margaux wines, and in particular Chateau Margaux, is so loved, because with wines like Latour and Lafite, they're stronger. They might not have that subtle side, that more kind of ethereal side. I think the Margaux in the best years does that balance almost better than any other wine. Maybe Haut-Brion is one of them, but you know, in my personal opinion, if you had my choice and the best vintage of any wine, Margaux always tops all the other first growths if you're talking about best examples, because it's so ethereal. To me, it's universal. The emotional attachment, and I've had this with many people, the emotional attachment that you drink with a great Margaux wine is different than Latour and Lafite, for sure. It's a different experience, and it's I see this with many people, that they experience Chateau Margaux in that way. So that strength is still there. I would say right now it's starting to decline a little bit on the taste. I think about an hour and a half in was, to me, the best time for this wine. So I think this is ready to drink. I would decant this wine because it does need to open up, but I would drink within an hour and a half. Can you continue to age this wine? You could, but it's really at its peak. It's right now sitting at its plateau and its peak. I'd probably sit there for another 5 years. I wouldn't stretch it too much more than that. So I'm just looking for a rating. I'm gonna go 94 points on this wine. It's not quite 95 points, but it's a really, really exceptional wine. And now that I know this, I'd love to taste an 86 Margaux, because if the second wine of Margaux is this nice, then the first wine must be like ridiculous. Hope you've enjoyed this tasting. Until next time, happy drinking.